Hello, you're watching the 51% here on France 24. I'm Erin Ogunkeye, stepping in for Annette Young. Coming up for you this week. Girls banned from secondary education and women prohibited from obtaining university degrees. Over a year and a half since the Taliban's return to power in Afghanistan, and some of the worst fears about the fate of women have materialized. Public scandals involving rape and murder, widespread abuse, and more generally, a boys' club culture failing to protect women. A scathing report reveals institutional misogyny in the UK's Met police force. We'll hear from the head of the Women's Equality Party for more. And a new take on Shakespeare's Romeo and Juliet, a theater company here in Paris reworking the classic by upending and deconstructing gender norms. But first, when the Taliban swept to power in August of 2021, the fate of women and girls was amongst the biggest concerns. Memories of their rule 20 years prior painting a bleak picture of what was to come. Well, indeed, a year and a half on, some of the worst expectations have come to pass. Girls have been banned from secondary education, while women are prohibited from going to university. Still defiant, many are turning to other methods of schooling, as you'll see in this report from Sonia Ghazali and Jose Boala.
It has been 5 months since Mariam continues her education in her living room after the Taliban banned university education for girls. This 21-year-old former university student takes English lessons on her phone through WhatsApp. Instructions are given by messages, photos, videos, and voice notes. She pays the equivalent of €5 each month for the course. On top of it, she also has to pay for a weak and expensive internet connection.
This is a video sent by our teacher, but because of the weak internet, I can't download it. The only thing I can download are voice messages. When I was studying in university, I had many dreams and hopes. I thought I would continue my studies, but today I am completely hopeless.
Like many other Afghan girls on social media, she calls on Elon Musk, CEO of SpaceX and owner of Twitter, to make his Starlink satellite internet service available in Afghanistan, as he did in Ukraine and Iran.
This request to Elon Musk by Afghan women is motivated by the fact that many of us don't have access to internet. Sometimes it's because of the financial problems that our families have. I support this request, and if he answered us positively, I would be very happy.
The Taliban claim that young girls will one day be able to study again. They, however, demand total segregation in educational institutions. According to this head of a private university, it will be a difficult task. He's already struggling to keep his accounts afloat.
We have financial problems because a third of the students aren't there. At the beginning of the school year, we couldn't register any girls. In the best case, if they're authorized to return at some point, they will be in a separate building, in separate classes, with exclusive teachers, which will further increase our expenses.
For now, Afghan women have no choice but to study at home or in secret schools.
In 2021, Wayne Couzens raped and murdered 33-year-old Sarah Everard in South London. Over the span of nearly 2 decades, David Carrick raped or sexually assaulted at least 12 women, eventually pleading guilty to dozens of serious offenses. And the most shocking part of these cases, though, is that both of the perpetrators were members of the Metropolitan police force in England. Many describe them as two bad apples in a larger force for good. But an independent report by Baroness Louise Casey revealed that sexism, along with racism and homophobia, are rampant, if not baked into the force. Well, the head of the Women's Equality Party in the UK, Mandu Reid, joins us now for more. Mandu, thank you so much for your time today.
Thank you for having me.
So what brought the Casey report about, and what do you think were some of the most shocking findings?
Yeah, since Sarah Everard's murder, there was an explosion in public consciousness here in the UK about how deeply flawed, deeply dysfunctional, and deeply dangerous the Metropolitan Police is. The nation was shocked by what happened. I will say that Black people weren't surprised. Black people have been campaigning to highlight endemic racism within the police for decades. But the conversation changed with the case of Sarah Everard. And what the report revealed was that violence against women and girls, despite the rhetoric, had been actively deprioritized and despecialized by the force. Units of the Metropolitan Police, macho units within the institution, had funding and budgets coming out of their ears. They had more cars than they could park in their car park. They would be able to buy specialist equipment that couldn't even be used on the streets of London. Yet, rape units didn't even have the resources for a functioning fridge to keep the samples that were taken from women who came and reported that crime. There was so much evidence that violence against women and girls was a low priority, despite the Met pleading the opposite.
And a report from The Guardian in April, Mandu, also revealed that sexual misconduct and racism claims are actually even higher in other English police forces.
Yeah, there are higher rates in police forces all across the country. And I think the Metropolitan Police is actually, in a way, a source of some of those issues, because there isn't a single chief constable or very senior officer in those 42 forces all across the country who hasn't served significant time in the Metropolitan Police. That tells you that you're talking about a systemic problem. That tells you you're talking about a pervasive culture within policing in this country that has misogyny at its heart, alongside racism and homophobia.
And this obviously has consequences for women themselves who are actually seeking help from the police with accusations of rape or sexual harassment.
Of course it does. We're at a point now where women's trust in police has collapsed. Completely collapsed. I personally would think twice before going to the police to report a crime, and certainly a sexual violence crime against me. And there was a poll recently which revealed in London just 4% of young women have high confidence in the Metropolitan Police. We have a policing by consent model in this country. You cannot have consent without trust. And so I think this absolutely has to be a watershed moment for policing in this country, because now that you're talking about racism, misogyny, and homophobia, it's the majority of people who are being betrayed, actively betrayed by policing. And so I don't think policing as we know it can continue on as it has.
Mandu, have any major changes been made since these revelations?
To be honest, no. The changes that were announced immediately after the Casey report amount to moving around deck chairs on the Titanic. What they've done is they've brought people into their standards unit from elsewhere in the force. They've made no substantive changes. In fact, the main discourse has been a debate about whether it's appropriate to label the Metropolitan Police as institutionally misogynist, racist, or homophobic, which is a complete distraction from the real issues. So I'm very, very disappointed by the response we've seen so far.
The Women's Equality Party launched a public awareness campaign in response to this report. What message were you trying to get across?
Yeah, in the UK, if you travel on public transport anywhere, you'll hear public announcements encouraging you to see it, say it, and get it sorted. That's if you witness something that looks suspicious. Now, what we identified was that we've seen what's happening to women, and we've been saying it, but actually the issue's been ignored. So we changed the public messaging, which is something that everyone in this country recognizes, to reflect the betrayal of policing, to address what's going on for women. And it had a huge impact, actually. And I think the police were forced to recognize that we're not going to let this go this time.
Now, as a political party, as the head of a political party, what solutions do you advocate for? Reforming, abolishing, or overhauling the Met Police?
I think we have to be talking about overhaul at this stage. I think we have to be talking about allowing those who have been most failed by policing, women, Black people, people of color, people from the LGBTQI community, to have a say in what the future of policing looks like. You can do that via many means. You can do that via Citizens' Assembly. You can do that via a royal commission that actually examines what policing should look like in the future. I also think by the time you need police in the criminal justice system, the crime has already happened. We need to be investing in prevention. And I think policing by consent, which is a really important principle, has been totally undermined by the revelations and the response we've had. And so we have to go back to first principles. We have to ask, what do people in this country want and need from policing, and look at narrowing the scope of it, because actually policing is dangerous rather than protecting and serving the public. And people have realized that, and they've had enough.
Mandu Reid, leader of the Women's Equality Party, thank you so much for coming on the show today.
Thank you for having me.
Well, since it was first performed in 1597, Shakespeare's play Romeo and Juliet has been one of the world's most beloved classics, reinterpreted countless times throughout the ages. Well, a theater company here in Paris is giving the piece a new makeover, upending, even deconstructing gender norms by putting the audience in control. Oliver Ferry.
Roméo, mais pourquoi es-tu Roméo? Renie ton père, il refuse ton nom.
The balcony scene in Romeo and Juliet, one of the most famous in theatre, and here the two star-crossed lovers are played as they were in Shakespeare's day by male actors. This is at the instigation of the audience, who before every performance are invited to cast the show.
C'est leur casting.
They do the casting. It's their decision, their choice. We try to create something unique for the cast and for the audience. Everyone, no matter what sex or gender they may be, shares the same feeling. The aim is really to do a different play every time, even if it is the same story.
The laughter and awkwardness soon fall away, and you no longer think of the cast's gender or appearance, focusing just on the acting, which is the very aim of the show.
When I was in acting school, I weighed more than 100 kilos, and I was always told I'd never do Romeo and Juliet. You can never play Juliet, it wouldn't work, you couldn't do that role. And I've always wanted to have the last laugh, to bring the audience with me, because I know I'm not the only one who thinks this. I know that everyone wants to see this classic love story in another light. You want to see everyone having the right to this love. There are people who don't want physical appearance and gender to be the be-all and end-all.
Se dire que le physique, l'apparence, le genre, tout ça n'a vraiment aucune importance.
This very contemporary version of Shakespeare's play draws on topical notions of deconstruction of relationships and gender, while not being all that different to how it was first staged by its author more than 4 centuries ago.
Well, that concludes this edition, but do feel free to get in touch with us via our Facebook, Twitter, or Instagram accounts. We love hearing your ideas. And until next time then, bye for now.